Hey everyone, and welcome back to the ever-branching paths of Hypertime, where we look at what might have been in the world of comic book movies. I'm Ryan Howitzer, and I'll be your guide. Now, as you may have guessed from my t-shirt, we are indeed again talking about Batman.
If this is your first time watching one of my videos, welcome. I hope you enjoy yourself, and I hope you stick around for the future videos. However, if you've been watching for a while, think back to both my review of Batman and my top 10 actors who almost played superheroes. There's one thing that I mentioned in both of those videos, and that's the time before Tim Burton's Batman, when Michael Uslan and Benjamin Melniker had the rights to Batman. That's what we're going to be talking about today.
You mean to tell me there were plans to do a 70s, 80s darker Batman story? Sign me up.
Now, they tried a couple other projects at some other studios, but eventually they decided, why get other studios to make it when we can just have Warner Brothers make it? So their idea was to adapt Strange Apparitions.
Strange Apparitions is probably the perfect story to adapt to the big screen. I mean, it's got lots of villains in it, there's lots of intrigue, there's questions about Batman's identity, there's romance. It's the perfect cinematic Batman story. It surprises me they haven't tried to make it again.
Strange Apparitions is a story written primarily by Steve Englehart and drawn primarily by Marshall Rogers. It was in the late 70s that the story came out, and it was in several issues of Detective Comics. A lot of stuff happened in these issues. There was a villain named Dr. Phosphorus who showed up and decided to hold the city at ransom. Crime boss Rupert Thorne made his first appearance. Hugo Strange came back and tried to take Batman's identity, and Batman had a few clashes with Deadshot and the Joker, leading to the Laughing Fish story that Batman the Animated Series made so popular. Now, another thing that happened in this run was the introduction of Silver St. Cloud. This was the first time it was shown that Bruce Wayne was in an active relationship with anybody, and she was Bruce's first love interest to learn his secret identity. Now, if you're anything like me, then you think, wow, that movie would have been awesome. Turns out Michael Uslan agrees with us. So they went into production on the movie, but they did make a few changes to the story. For example, instead of Rupert Thorne, they decided to go with the Penguin because the Penguin was a bigger name. And they also went with the Joker, giving him a bigger role over Hugo Strange, because at that time, nobody really knew who Hugo Strange was.
Once again, we find that if a villain is not the Joker, movie executives are not interested in him.
The writing duties on this movie were given to Tom Mankiewicz, who's best known for Superman, Superman 2, a mediocre Bond movie, a really awesome Bond movie, and a Bond movie that's really lame and hasn't aged well, but I really enjoy. He was told that he was to create an origin story for Batman the same way he'd done for Superman, but to include some of the more realistic Bond-type action in it.
I don't really think basing Batman off of Bond in the late 70s, early 80s would have been the best idea. Maybe they meant the Sean Connery Bond, I don't know.
In 1983, Mankiewicz had completed the script, which was entitled The Batman, hence the title of this episode. Now, what's really interesting to me is who they decided to get to direct the movie. Their first choice was Ivan Reitman. Now, this is really weird to me because Michael Uslan wanted to make the definitive dark version of Batman, if you remember back to my Tim Burton's Batman review. So why would he go with Ivan Reitman, whose two most notable movies at this time were Meatballs and Stripes, both of which are comedies? Now, Ivan Reitman is a very talented director, and it turns out that he can do some stuff with dark imagery, like we saw in Ghostbusters. But even then, Ghostbusters turned out to be a comedy. In fact, pretty much every movie he's made is a comedy. If you want a dark Batman movie, you don't give it to a guy like Ivan Reitman.
Now let's move on to speculative casting. There's actually a decent amount of people who were suggested or even cast for the movie. And you already know about one of them. The most infamous one. The one I've already talked about on this show.
It's hard to call this speculative casting since they pretty much had a clear idea of who they wanted for this movie. David Niven was supposed to play Alfred. William Holden was supposed to be Commissioner Gordon. At one point, Peter O'Toole was considered for the Penguin, who was supposed to be a crime boss with a low body temperature instead of an overweight crime boss. so basically Mr. Freeze. And of course you all know about Bill Murray as Batman, because I've talked about that before. Now here's a really interesting one. They wanted David Bowie to play the Joker. That would have been awesome.
You know, seeing as how Jared Leto is the Joker, are we kind of going to get to see what David Bowie's Joker had been like?
Robin was also supposed to be in the movie, and the two names that I always hear attached to Robin were Eddie Murphy, which would have been really, really weird, and Michael J. Fox, which would have been kind of weird. Maybe he would freak out because the Joker called him chicken at one point during the movie. Now, Silver St. Cloud is a very big factor in the Strange Apparitions story, but I never heard any casting rumors for her. However, I do know who I would have picked. I would have picked either Kim Basinger or Michelle Pfeiffer. Yeah, I know, they'd both go on to be in Batman movies anyway. They would have been perfect for this role. Now, who would I have picked for Batman? Because, as you know, I would not be in favor of Bill Murray as Batman. Well, okay, you already know who my pick is. It's Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood would have been the perfect Batman for the 70s or early 80s. Now, I've also heard that before Reitman was brought on, they were considering casting an unknown for Batman, which is usually a pretty good bet for superhero movies. I mean, it worked for Superman, it worked for Thor. That's usually a pretty safe bet when it comes to superhero movies. Now, the other name that I hear associated with Batman is Ray Liotta, which comes in after Ivan Reitman but before Tim Burton. Ray Liotta would have been a pretty good choice in my opinion. I mean, he was great in Goodfellas. I think he would have been a great Batman.
Now let's ask the question that we always have to ask on this show. Why didn't this movie get made?
The movie was all set to go into production, but then David Niven and William Holden, both of whom were cast in the movie, died. And then the script went through 9 rewrites, which caused Ivan Reitman to leave. Eventually, Reitman was replaced by Joe Dante. Yes, that Joe Dante.
Pro tip. If you have to rewrite your movie 9 times, you're probably not going to end up making it.
Kind of like the James Cameron Spider-Man movie, the script for this was pretty much just cannibalized and turned into the Tim Burton Batman movie. Certain characters were taken out altogether, like Robin. Penguin was turned back into Rupert Thorne, who was then turned into Carl Grissom, a completely made-up character for the movie. And Silver St. Cloud was turned into Vicky Vale. That's pretty much how you get from the Batman to Tim Burton's Batman.
With the right cast and the right director, this movie would have been amazing. I'm really kind of bummed that it wasn't made. I mean, even if Ivan Reitman had directed and Bill Murray had been Batman, I'd still like to see it.
I still hold out hope that someday we'll get an adaptation of Strange Apparitions. It's that good of a story. In fact, now that Ben Affleck is Batman, I'd really like to see him both star in and direct a Strange Apparitions adaptation. It's got all the cool villains in it. We already have a Joker and a Deadshot cast. And I've heard that we already have a Hugo Strange cast too, so there's half the characters. Why don't we go ahead and make it?
Well, guys, once again, our journey on the ever-branching paths of Hypertime has come to an end. But join me next time when I look at X-Men Origins Magneto, like I was supposed to do this time. Oh yeah, there's more schedule changes. Wait till after the credits. Hey guys, there are going to be some schedule changes. Most notably, instead of covering Fantastic Four in my next video, I'm going to be covering Daredevil, because it's April and the Daredevil series is coming out, and the Fantastic Four movie comes out in August, so I kind of want to line those two up. Also, yeah, I know I switched around the Hypertime videos. That was a mistake on my part. I'm sorry about that. But there's another thing I want to announce. In November, I'm not going to be making any videos about comic books. I'm going to dedicate the entire month of November to James Bond, in honor of the next Bond movie. So I'll be making a few videos about James Bond. So if you're not as big a Bond fan, hopefully I'll be able to convert you, but please keep watching my videos. I promise I'll do my best to entertain you guys.